everyone, and welcome to our second episode of Paradox Untold Stories from Athletic Directors. Dustin and I are really excited to be back today. I am Dr. Danielle Lapointe, and my co-host is Dr. Dustin Smith. And we are really looking forward to getting athletic directors' stories out there so people know that they are not alone when they have crazy things happen to them after hours and during the day. And Dustin, go ahead and introduce our next guest.
Yeah, man, I'm honored. I said this last week when we talked to who has since been done, and I can't take the credit for it. I'll let Mark tell that story. But when we talked to Becky, I was all excited about just being in her presence and knowing who Becky is. Well, Mark and I got to know each other through presentations. We're actually faculty together for 719, so we are national faculty. So I got to meet Mark actually in person in Denver at the National AD Conference, but we've exchanged emails and text messages throughout a brief time. And so I've gotten to know Mark, and I'm excited because I call Mark one of the podfathers. He is created this AD podcast space. He was one of the first to get in on it. I say one of the first. They were the first. The off-duty ADs, if you'll go back and you can research that, and Mark may talk about that a little bit. But Mark really doesn't need any introduction because of the legend that he is because of that podcast. But then we talk about his involvement at the national level, and then just how I've gotten to bounce ideas off of him. So I'm excited that we get to have Dr. Mark Rerick here, and we call it Paradox, but I don't know what we call three of us together. I don't know what that would be, but it's Dr. Mark Rerick. And so what I want to do to begin with, Mark, I want to first say thank you for being on the podcast, but I also want to talk to you about kind of what we asked Becky last week. Tell us what the resume is not going to tell us. Tell us about who Mark is aside from an athletic director at Grand Forks, North Dakota.
Yeah, definitely will. I do have to comment on Becky right away, though, the story that Dustin's referring to. When Dustin's texting me back and forth about being on this podcast, I happened to be at a game, and so I said, okay, well, I'm gonna listen to the first episode of Paradox and kind of hear what this is all about. And I got about midway through that and had to send Dustin a text, and I said, I can't believe you're going to make me follow through Sox Moran. Like there's absolutely nothing that I'm going to say over the next X minutes that's going to top what Becky shared with you. So the quick background to me, I guess, what I tell people all the time, I'm in public education, and I mean that's really been my entire life. I have a twin brother. My twin brother and I were born a month after my parents took their first teaching jobs. My dad coached football, basketball, track and field, coached baseball in the summer. So he was year round. And, we grew up right in the middle of hunting country. And I've never been hunting because our life is 365 days of sports, has been forever. Right through high school, I was fortunate enough to play multiple sports in college. Fresh from the factory, got my first teaching and coaching job. Became an AD at that spot, and have bounced around a little bit in athletics ever since. So, I mean, there literally hasn't been a year of my life where the entire year wasn't occupied by sports. And I'm fortunate enough that I like sports. I'm fortunate enough that I like learning. I believe very strongly in public education, and being in a job where all of those things come together has worked really well for me. And so here I am, however many years later, and still passionate about learning, and still looking for new ways to do the job, and enjoying watching kids compete.
So, Mark, as we talk about where you're at in Grand Forks, North Dakota, and for those that are geographically challenged, that's not an international school. That is in the constitutional 50 states of the United States. Would you kind of just give a background, kind of a geography lesson, I guess, of where Grand Forks is and just kind of what weather's like for you right now?
Yeah, we're pretty close to an international school. So what I like to tell people, if you open up your web browser of choice and you type in coldest U.S. cities. Grand Forks is usually third on that list. One and two are going to be Anchorage and Fairbanks. And number 3 is going to be Grand Forks. And so that's where I live. So Dustin and Danielle asked me when I hopped on here what the temperature was. And I think it was a half joking comment just to see what it was. But we do happen to be on the tail end of a blizzard that rolled through yesterday. So we've got a cold front coming through. So as I looked at my weather app when I got to work this morning, our air temp is 15 below right now. We're running a wind chill of about 35 below. That's going to be our high for the day. The temps will keep dropping throughout the day. By tonight, we'll be looking at an air temp of about 20 to 25 below with wind chills, more like 50 to 60 below. So that's not sustained. It usually sticks around for a day or two. We do, every January we'll go through a period here where, there's about a 4, 5, 6 day stretch where we don't see zero. Those weeks get a little bit long. That's not all of North Dakota. We're a little worse than most. We're in the way northeast corner of the state. So I said almost international. We're about an hour from the Canadian border. And in terms of the contiguous United States, we are really close to the northernmost point. There's that little nub on the top of Minnesota that has us beat. But other than that, we're about as far north as it gets. So it's cold here. We do have our moments in the summer, though. We'll go through stretches in July where we're going to be between 90 to 100 and rocking 90% humidity. Again, in short stretches. So what we all look forward to the 1 week of spring and the 1 week of fall that we get in between our summers and winters.
So what you're telling me is when you say you don't see zero, that's not a low temperature. You're talking about that's a high temperature. You don't see zero.
Correct. Yeah, we'll be below zero. Like I said, usually about a week every January where we don't get it. And what's really fun in those days is a lot of times the warm fronts then will come through at night. And so there are times where our highest temp of the day hits at midnight. Where it just warms up through nights or whatever. So we have a very counterproductive weather here. In the winter, you want cloud cover because the cloud cover is what keeps the heat in close to the land. So our coldest days are the ones where there isn't a cloud in the sky. So you go through this 2-month stretch where you don't really want to see the sun because seeing the sun means it's going to be 20 plus degrees colder than usual. So it takes some getting used to.
Well, tapping into Three Socks Moran, I'm just guessing in December, January, February, there's probably not a lot of streaker stories up there in South Dakota or North Dakota.
Yeah, you don't see them. October football, you're not going to see a streaker here in October football. So maybe in September, but certainly not late in the season.
Well, being in Florida, I can't even fathom these temperatures that you're speaking of. But so is it safe to guess that you guys do not have any winter sports that are outdoors?
No. We barely have spring sports that are outdoors. It's depending on the year, and this is going to be an ugly one. We've got a lot of snowfall right now, and so jokingly, the ADs in our conference when we make our schedule, we try to stay fairly light. Most of our spring sports start in early April. But we put those games on paper with the assumption that we're going to end up moving them again later. And so, we'll try to be light in early April, and then we try to be light in late May because we just know we're going to need those dates for reschedules too. And it's spring is interesting. We've kind of set this threshold of 40 degrees as being, when it's warm enough for us to play. And there are times that we get to 40 degrees before the snowfall is gone. There's times where the snowfall slowly goes away and we don't hit 40. But we all kind of laugh because on April 2, on April 3, if it's 40 degrees, we haven't hit the threshold, we're not playing yet. But there's years where come early May, we're still talking 40 and then it's like, I'm pretty sure it's going to be close to 40. So we're playing because we're running out of dates. So it's springs can get interesting here.
And if you follow Mark at all on Twitter, I just want to know how many times have you rescheduled a rescheduled game?
I actually just did a lot of that yesterday. The blizzard that rolled through yesterday, I think, I have to look at my total. I think I had to move 24 games And of those 24, probably half of them were games that had been rescheduled from January. So it's the other running joke among North Dakota ADs, and not just North Dakota. I mean, a lot of the upper Midwest. But we canceled school for the blizzard yesterday, which means everybody gets a day off except the AD, and so the AD is we're all gonna donate 6+ hours of work to our school districts yesterday to get games moved around as quickly as we can. So yeah, that happens a lot. And then because I run 2 high schools, it's the game load for all of those. So we cancel school, and the first thing I do is start spreading calendars out on the kitchen table because it's time to go to work.
That cannot be easy to rescheduled games. That just, yeah. So kudos to you for being able to do that for your athletes and your coaches, because that is, if we have a hurricane roll through and we're closed for a week or so, you think that's bad, but then hearing you and what you're saying, that doesn't seem so bad anymore. But yeah, that's.
Yeah, and our reschedule, we're dealing with the distance, and I know that's something that's foreign to a lot of ADs, the distance between our schools. We have, and we're actually a little closer here, but I've got conference schools that are a 2-hour drive away. The school I was in prior to this one, our closest conference school was an 1.5-hour drive. That was our closest one. Our farthest one was a 5-hour drive. And so, in terms of managing weather, that's part of our difficulty here. We all have a no school equals no activities rule here. And so if school is canceled for weather, we're just done in the afternoon. Well, you might be in school, but your opponent has canceled, whether it's a home or away game. And so you have to battle that, and then when you are in school, even that's a chore, because there's times where my kids are getting on a bus at noon or 1 o'clock, and they're not going to get home till midnight. And so by 11 in the morning, we have to guess what the travel conditions are going to be 10 hours from then. And I've always said, being an AD in the upper Midwest, whether or not to put kids on a bus is by far the most stressful part of this job. I would rather talk to an angry parent every day than make a lot of those decisions, because it is tough, trying to decide if you're going to take a game away from 40 kids or if you're going to risk putting them on a bus when you don't know what coming home looks like. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Well, and on top of that, then if you make your decision and then the wind blows a different direction, and all of a sudden your decision could have been the other one, then you feel bad, and that's a burden that I feel like all ADs have experienced. What's the right call, and when do you make it? And then you can be wrong. It's a 50-50 shot, so it's not an easy thing to do.
Yeah, well, you're never going to be right. I mean, because the half of the parents and the half of the folks that agree with you aren't going to say anything. It's right. It's the people who are pretty sure you're an idiot. Those are the ones you're going to hear from, and they're going to come up no matter what. So, I mean, there's a little benefit in knowing no matter what decision you make is the wrong decision. So somebody's going to let you know about it. So then it's just deferring to, coaches and kids and bus drivers and whatever else. So yeah, I don't enjoy that part of it, especially when we get to this part of the season when things have been rescheduled and the calendar's getting tight, and moving yesterday's games, we're getting to the point where we're playing 4 games a week and a lot of sports because we're just running out of dates. This is our last week of regular season wrestling. Tournaments are next week, and then it's a steady stream of tournaments here on out. So we're just running out of days. So we're kind of hoping yesterday was our last blizzard. I'm hoping we're done with that now.
And this ain't even the stories we're trying to talk about. I mean, these are just real life of what you're dealing with every day. But I know the point of what we're trying to do is just tell stories. And just be able to tell some fun stories, some stories that we can just laugh at and say, you can't really make this stuff up. This really happened, and this is what it looked like. So we talked a little bit before we got on here about some of your stories, and I know with your years of experience, you've got several stories. But is there a story or two that just stick out to you that you say, man, this is an all-time great, and this is one that I look back on and think, that's a really great story, and that's something I wasn't trained for.
Yeah, I do have one that I tell often, when I'm teaching or presenting, and I still haven't decided. Dustin, you probably heard me say this, but I still don't know if this was my finest moment as an AD or my worst moment as an AD. It's one of those two. I don't think it lands in the middle anywhere. It's on one of those two
Well, you
extremes.
can't be right. You can't make everybody happy, right? You're never going to be 100% right.
Right. But
I'm excited for this story. You guys have built this up. Like, I'm excited for it.
So, real quick background, hockey is king in Grand Forks. If anybody knows anything about college hockey, we're the home of the University of North Dakota. And so we are a hockey hotbed. That trickles down into our youth programs. We typically get about 120 kids per age group that start hockey, and they work through that funnel. My high school teams, we'll cut in the neighborhood of 20 kids a year to keep us at that 40 to 44 for JV varsity. So hockey is a really, really big thing here. So our the location of the Ed Center in town, my office is on the way south edge of town. So there isn't a whole lot of anything else around here. Across the street, one way, there's a softball complex. So certainly that's not getting used in the summer. And then just down the road a little bit, it's one of our middle schools. So by the middle of the day, it's quiet on this end of town. So you're in trouble when all of a sudden a hockey parent comes walking into your office and says, "Well, I just happened to be in the area, just happened to be in the neighborhood." And I said, "Well,
never a good sign."
Yeah, don't know about that, but let's see what you got. So he had a junior son. And his junior son, 5'4", 120 pounds, dripping wet. I mean, he was not a large kid. He was small. Great second baseman, and that's probably the most unfortunate part about this is he was a really, really good second baseman for us. Had he put his efforts into baseball, he would have been a college baseball player. But loves hockey like everybody else around here. And so Dad comes into my office, and Dad's complaint is that he's on the JV as a junior. And not only is he on the JV as a junior, the coach is making him practice with the JV and has had the audacity to invite him to varsity practices also. And so I explain, our coach recognizes some of the positive attributes of your kid. That's why he's getting invited to varsity practices. And I get 3 hours of ice time a night is a lot of ice. But if he wants to work with the varsity team, it's additional time to skate and get to know the kids. And oh man, this dad just goes off, and he is chirping the coach, oh, my coach is an idiot and doesn't know what's going on. And my kid has been in the program and has been, he was an A squirt and he was an A bantam. And I mean, all, just on and on and on. And I mean, this just kept going. And it was, he's a really good student in the classroom, and he's a really hard worker, and he's a great teammate. And I agreed with him along the way. It's like, yep, everything I know about him. I mean, I'm looking at his grades in the computer. It looks good. I know that he's involved in this organization. It all looks great. And anyway, this dad's in my office for 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and he's to the point where his face is just bright red. And I should have started with, I mean, Dad's not a large man either. I mean, Dad's probably tops out about 5'6". His wife's even smaller than he is. And anyway, he's just hollering at me, and I'm agreeing with him. He's a great worker. He's a great teammate. He's a great student. He's all that. And so finally, this dad pounding his fist on the desk looks across at me, and he says, "Well, you're so smart then, Mr. Athletic Director. You tell me, what does my kid need to do to get a college hockey scholarship?" And I just very calmly looked at him and I said, "He needs to have more athletic parents." No.
How did that go over?
Well, it was the end of the conversation.
Did you just walk out?
I don't recall exactly. I know there was a profanity that followed. And I don't recall exactly what he said, but that was the end of it. He stood up and he walked out, and he just went stomping out. And my secretary, when you leave my office, you got to walk by my secretary's desk, and of course she had heard him yelling for the better part of the 30 minutes. And then saw him stomp out of here, and she came in, eyes just wide. She's like, "What just happened?" It's like, I'm pretty sure I just told him he sucks at sports.
Done. So let me ask this question. Well, maybe two questions. one, is that like the original mic drop? Like, when did that happen? Like, was that prior to all the Barack Obama dropping the mic, all that stuff, or is this more recent?
That was in my early years in Grand Forks. That would have been sometime around 2013, 2014. Somewhere around there. So would have been post Obama. But I tell you what, it's situations like that where I start to think about the layout of my office. Because and the office was redesigned by I think my predecessor. I think. Before me is the one who designed it. So, but I have an L-shaped desk that faces the door. So when I'm sitting at my desk, I'm pinned into my office. The guest chairs are right by the door. Also, and so there isn't much of an opportunity if I want to just leave with somebody in my office. That's a tough thing to do, and it's it was in those times where you start to think about the layout of the office. It's like, I'm stuck in here with this guy as long as he wants me to be stuck in here. So it was probably fortunate that he just swore and left.
This extremely unathletic parent that you were caught in the room with, maybe not intimidating at that point, but down the road maybe so.
Yeah, it's well, that's just it, and then it's like, well, how, what do I want the headline of the newspaper to read? Because if he stands in front of me, I'm going to have to physically remove him at some point, and I'm not sure I want to do that either. So getting him to leave was all right.
You said that he was a junior, so that means that you still have like a year and a half of possible run-ins with this family. How did that go? Was there any other like awkwardness, or was it like?
No, there really wasn't.
Was he in the weight room? Did you see him in there, sneaking in there sometimes, Dad?
No, and again, there's a little bit of a benefit to my job in I'm a building level AD, but I'm not in the buildings. And then because I oversee 2 high schools, it's a fairly limited number of games that I can get to. So, and then I do some of that AD trick too, where I know every door and every corner I can stand in. Where if I don't want to be bothered, I know exactly how to get into a building and watch a game from an area where I won't be bothered. And I can't remember if his kid played hockey as a senior or not. But I know he did play baseball. He continued playing baseball. And baseball is one of our facilities here where it's really easy for me to get to a spot where I can be seen, but it's really tough to approach me. And so, in terms of accidental run-ins with the parent, it wasn't a concern. I saw him at some baseball games from time to time. And actually, I still ump a lot, and I don't ump for high school teams, but in the summer, and I even umped one of our Legion games, I think that summer. And so I was behind the plate umping with the dad sitting behind me for a game. He didn't say anything there either. No, so I managed to avoid future confrontation with him.
So at what point did this thought come into your head? Was it early on in the conversation, or did it just happen at that moment when you said, all right, you didn't think through it, you just reacted and responded?
It's one of those that kind of built up throughout because, when I tell the story, I make it sound like it's a cold comment out of nowhere. But I mean, that was some of the things that had come up along the way where, he was asking, why isn't my kid, playing varsity? Why isn't my kid playing varsity? And I can tell him, like, look, I'm a basketball guy, first of all, so I'm in no position to assess your kid's hockey ability. But I do know that, the last 2 kids that we've sent to college for hockey, to Division I college for hockey, were both over 6 feet tall and over 180 pounds. I mean, he's like, oh, my kid's fast. My kid's fast. Yeah, he's great. He's great on his skates, but he's going to get killed if he skates against, Division I guys. And so we'd had a little bit of that along the way where, I had just said, he's got some physical limitations to college sports. And I don't remember, exactly what I had said along the way, but I mean, that had come up, that he's just small. There's not a whole lot he could do about that. But the comment itself, it was one of those where it's just there, right? Like whatever part of your brain does the blurting just kind of took over for a second there, and it was just out. And so it wasn't even until it was done and I was talking to my secretary, I thought, boy, that was kind of funny, actually.
When you think about just to that point, what gets you? I mean, you listen, and we all deal with mad parents. and they will all question coaches, or they'll bring up Julie jump shot isn't making the shots that my daughter is, or whatever it may be. And so they just continue to chirp, 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 chirp. And at some point, you want the meeting to end, and you're trying to figure out how this meeting is going to end and not have the resolution that they probably want, to be honest with you. And so at some point, did you have to say, this has drug on far too long. We need to just try to abruptly end this deal, or just rip the Band-Aid off and say, here it is. Reality is what it is.
And I hadn't, and it was part of the thing. I would deal with it a lot differently now in my 10th year in Grand Forks than I would have then, and a lot of it was because I had come through small schools. And Dustin, I know you know what this is like. When you come through a small school as an AD, there's only so much you can do where you kind of shove people out. I mean, you're to some extent you're beholden to them all the time, because you're not going to be able to avoid them. And you have to be friendly, and you have to be approachable, and you have to be all those things. And because, prior to Grand Forks, I had spent 6 years in smaller schools where I was all those things. So I was really used to, with parent meetings, just talking until the parent talked themselves out. And whether that was, 15 minutes or an hour or longer, one of my core values is perseverance, right? So it's like I'm just here, and I'm going to let it ride. Now, again, I think being in a larger district helps. There's a couple of things I would do differently with him now. First of all, drop-ins to the office don't happen anymore. And that's for anybody. I do the same thing, even with, cold calls from salesmen. But when our receptionist up front says, "Hey, so-and-so's here to see you," if it's not a planned meeting, it's no, tell them I'm busy, and let's get them on the calendar. The other thing that I do, and I know this is a trick a lot of ADs use, but I'll start meetings by telling them when the end is. I'll say, "Hey, I've got a phone call coming in at 10 o'clock, or I've got another meeting, that I've got to get to in a different building," and it doesn't even matter if that's true or not, right? But you create that end time. So I would deal with it differently. So, that was part of the difficulty in this situation, was I hadn't created an out for myself. I was prepared to do what I had always done, and I'll just let this parent run himself out, and he just didn't. And it got to the point where it was the same things. I mean, you guys know how it is, right? It's the same comments coming back, a third time, a fourth time, a fifth time. And it's like, this guy's going to keep saying the same things. And
you're just going in a circle, constantly
right.
going in a circle, and because you're not, because the parents aren't getting the feedback that they want. They have a very direct result they're looking for, and like Dustin said, it's not something that you're gonna give to them. So it becomes a very difficult conversation. I've only been at like larger schools. Both of the schools that I were AD at were 2,300 kids plus. So I can't tell you how many times I've thought these things and I've never blurted it out at a parent. So that's a little bit of a hero there, because I never had the actual courage to say it, even though I've thought it. But yeah, you're right. Some of those tricks you're talking about are really important, especially for maybe new ADs, to know you don't want to get yourself in a situation you can't get out of. Kind of set yourself up for a worst case scenario. And maybe the meeting goes a lot better than you anticipated, and you don't need to use that incoming phone call or something along those lines. But it's really important to have that in case you do need it, because you are going to have some crazy parents sometimes.
Yeah, well, and trying to control that lack of comment. And I think about it. I don't remember the entire situation, but my first AD job was in a small school, a town of 1,500. Our K-12 enrollment was about 400, something like that. So we're running 40 kids per grade, something like that. I mean, it was a small town, and I had a parent who was mad about something and had stopped me about it. And I don't remember what I said, but I said something that was kind of snarky, kind of sarcastic, real chippy. Of course, part of the issue was I was a 30-year-old AD at the time, 28 or whatever I was. And they said that, and then they left. And of course, my blood's boiling. And I stopped at the grocery store on the way home, just basically to grab milk. and that parent was in line in front of me at the grocery store, and that was the clue. Was like and I should have known better. I mean, I grew up in a town of 1,000 people, right? I mean, I grew up in a town where my dad, he couldn't go anywhere without people giving him advice. I should have known better, but that's when you realize, like, oh man, you've got to figure out something. So, little insulation in the bigger community, Danielle. I mean, that's right. I mean, I can say things, and the odds of me at least immediately bumping into that parent are pretty slim.
Well, you mentioned one of your core values is perseverance, and you don't get perseverance 1 minute at a time. You got to build into that. So it took some time, obviously, for you to, and if it went on for the better part of 30 minutes of pretty one-sided, hey, this is what I think, and telling my story, I would say you lived up to your core value of persevering through that conversation.
Masochism might have been a better core value at that point. I think he was giving it to me pretty good, and he didn't. I think part of it was just just incredulous that there was an athletic director in Grand Forks who knew nothing about hockey. Which is actually kind of funny because the AD before me was Todd Olson, who just finished as the NIAAA president, who's also a basketball guy, right? I mean, so Grand Forks, which is one of the hockey craziest places in America, has now suffered through 17 years of athletic directors who know nothing about hockey.
Perseverance.
Right.
Maybe that's their core value too.
That could be. They just deal with us.
Yeah. Well, that's a very intriguing story to me because the amount of parents that come through that want to speak to the ADs and want to hear their side of it. It can get tricky sometimes. It's not a fun position to be in, especially when you sometimes are completely blindsided. You don't know what the parent wants or what the issue is because you are not the one who's out on the field or the ice with them every single day, and you kind of have to navigate that. Not the easiest thing because you don't need to be the one who knows everything about hockey. You need your hockey coach to be the expert in hockey.
Yep. Yeah. And it's always easier, I think, when parents start by saying, I just want you to know this isn't about playing time, right? Because as soon as a parent says that, all right, we're going to get the playing time, right? Sooner or later, this is about playing time. And so for me, it's always easier when they start with that line. I had a phone call with a parent earlier this year and kind of what you're talking about. I went into that conversation loaded for bear. I was 100% certain that this was going to turn into one of those fights. And it absolutely wasn't. The parent was great. I mean, parent was great. Parent had some legit concerns, had some legit questions, had some things I needed to follow up on. But I mean, I was so certain that this was going to end up with me probably hanging up on a parent or something, right? Because I was just certain that this is what's going to happen. And it was the absence of that line where I thought, I'd better back down because, I was waiting for, I just want you to know, this isn't about playing time. And it didn't start that way. And so I'm like, all right, I guess I'll give him a couple minutes here to say something. And so you have to be so careful. I mean, there's times where the nicest parent in the world where you think things are going to be fine are the one who unloads on you. And then there's other times where the ones you don't expect it are actually the most pleasant, forgiving, and understanding ones to talk to. And we don't see those very often in our profession, but man, it's fun to run into a parent who says, I don't like dealing. I don't want to deal with what you deal with. I can't imagine what your day looks like. I don't want to make your day worse, but I think you should know this. Right. And then just lays it out and then says, I like the ones who say, what, when I ask, what would you like me to do with this? What would you like the next step to be? And I always like the ones who are like, that's up to you to decide. I just wanted you to know, I just wanted you to have this information. I'm not looking for any action beyond whatever. And we just don't run into them often enough. Right. I mean, too often it's a 5'6", 240-pound dad banging his fist on my desk in the middle of a Wednesday afternoon.
Well, and isn't it that in our profession that sometimes we get so geared up thinking a conversation is going to go one certain way, and then it doesn't. And so maybe we're stressed to that point, and we worry ourselves worrying about that conversation that ends up not even happening. Yep. It ends up being totally opposite of what that is. And I think that's a takeaway from any conversation that we have as athletic administrators is that sometimes we expect the worst and it's not what happens.
Yep. Well, it gets reinforced so often, right? I mean, because there's so many times where you go into a conversation thinking you know what's going to happen, and then that's exactly what happens, right? When you go into it assuming that some parent's going to yell at you about playing time, and then they do, right? Or you go into it, assuming that some parent is going to, complain about whatever, and that's exactly what happens. And I think that's the issue, is that happens so often that we don't give the benefit of the doubt to every parent. We assume that we know what all 10 conversations are about. Really, we only know 9 of them. it's that 10th one that catches us off guard.
Yeah, you got to be optimistic. You go into the conversation. I think it's so important to just listen. Yeah. Listen, like, what are they? Let them just talk and get everything out, and listen. And sometimes you got to pull a Mark. Sometimes you don't have to. But yeah, and then the other takeaway that I think is great from what you said, and the sneaky AD exit and enter. That's amazing. That is such good information. To have the sneaky way in and out, and not have to get cornered at the concession stand area or over here somewhere. So that is a great thing to have on your radar if your campus allows that. Some facilities are not so conducive to that, but that's also a great thing.
And especially getting in and out of the facilities. I actually tell that to brand new ADs when they're going to new buildings, new places, and I tell them that when you're doing an initial walkthrough of your new building to familiarize yourself with it, because you're always going to look for where are the locker rooms, where's the officials room, where do I store things, like you're going to look for those big things. So, but I always take a peek for where there's a spot off the beaten path where you can park, if there's a back door, a side door that you can get into, where you're not wandering through the masses to get in or out. You give yourself a place to be, and then kind of the same thing when you start watching games. You're going to have a spot. Unless you have a game day duty and a spot to be, spend your first couple of home games checking to see where folks sit, and see if there is a corner of a gym you can get to, see if there is a spot where you've got easy entrance, easy access, where you can be visible, right? Make sure people can see you, but that it takes a little bit of an effort to get to you. And then you can be strategic about when you do your walkthroughs, right? Because you don't want to be completely inaccessible, but you can be strategic about when you're walking through crowds, and you can choose the time when your basketball team's up 40, right? And now it's like, okay, well, now I'll go grab some popcorn. Now I don't mind wandering through parents, but just to have those little spots in mind, and try to get that figured out right away.
Well, I think you talk about facilities, Mark, but I think also as important is think about the layout of your office, that you had to rethink through if this situation happens and God forbid it goes south, what that really looks like, and how you can escape, for lack of a better term, or how you can get out of that situation without having to be physical, without having to, some of these things you need to think through. Any AD, not just a new AD, but any AD needs to just reevaluate kind of how they're set up, and in case something goes, a meeting goes south, because sometimes they will, what that looks like for you, and how to be able to get out of that.
Yeah, and I know one of the tricks, and my office isn't big enough for this, but one of the tricks is just to have a separate little meeting table in your office if possible, and keep that by the door. And have that set up in a way where, if needed, you can just walk away from that table. Because a lot of times the way desks are set up, a lot of the time you're facing the door of your office, and so you are stuck behind your desk, and so meetings at desks can get tough. And so, yeah, for me it's tough. I have a smallish office that's about half desk, and there's no way to move it around. It's all attached to something. So for me, the exit has really been, giving an endpoint to that meeting, and just letting them know, look, at 10 o'clock, I have to be, in a different conference room, or whatever that is. So then when you're verbally ending the conversation, or when it gets to the point where you have to stand up and start walking out, it's not a surprise, and it's not an act of aggression. It's an act of, I told you I need to be somewhere, and now I'm on my way out. And there have been times in my office actually where I've made up meetings in buildings, right, where I've told somebody, hey, I need to be up at Central High School at 10 o'clock. So, we have about 30 minutes, and there have been times where a parent has finished talking while I'm putting my jacket on in my office, right? I mean, I am putting the jacket on and I'm grabbing my keys, and we are going to make a short walk together down the hallway. And then he's going to go to the visitor's lot and I'm going to go to the employee lot. But you create that endpoint. And so that's what I've done now is, at some point I'm still going to have to leave the office and I'm going to have to walk past a parent, but by creating that endpoint now, it's not an aggressive leave. It's not me leaving because I'm cornered. It's not me leaving because I'm mad. It's me leaving because, like I told you, I have to leave at this point.
Or it's the period in the sentence where you say your parents, you as parents are not athletic, and that's the kid's problem.
That'll do it too.
Or you can do that.
Right. Yeah. Well, and the nice part about a line like that is, for me anyway, I'm about 6'3", and I'm way under my college playing weight, but I'm still fairly close to 200 pounds. So if I'm using that line to a parent, there's a chance that I'm bigger than that parent is. Right. So I still have a little bit of that going for me, right? But you're not going to use that line on the dad who's 6'6", 260 and played football D1. So
that'd be bad call. Bad call.
Know your limitations.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate you coming on and sharing that story. Yeah, I'm like still baffled that you said it, to be quite honest. So that is a great tidbit, and I Dustin, you can say some things, but I don't want to forget to thank our sponsor, Ticket Spicket, for making this this podcast possible. So huge shout out to them. And if you need any digital tickets, they are the way to go. But yeah, that was, I'm going to be thinking about that over and over. And I'm going to be also thinking about how many times I should have used that line. Like I can already account like 3 times where I'm like, that would have fit perfect there. I should have used it.
So
I don't know if it would have ended as well for me, but yeah, there's
a lot of spots. I have to appreciate your Ticket Spicket plug there. Ticket Spicket was our big sponsor when we started the off-duty ADs. So, and I'll still hit you guys up if we decide to revisit our podcast to get Ticket Spicket in there. But I just, as I saw the logo on your screens when we got on, the last thing I did before I came in and jump on with you guys was just walk through our athletic department mailbox, and we had a Ticket Spicket check sitting in there for the last quarter's ticket sales or whatever. So it's been a good platform for us too.
Well, that's why he's a podfather, when he can reel that back in and say, hey, we're going to thank the sponsors, and here's a real life application for that. So
we're going to save that one.
Mark, I appreciate you just the mentorship, the willingness to to visit, to share your ideas, and to laugh at my sarcasm, my jokes sometimes, my talking about. In full disclosure, Mark and I talk about what summer's like for me as opposed to him, and we talked about the weather to begin with, but we were going back and forth about the weather, and I said that the trade-off we get is we have mosquitoes that you can saddle here, or that they can carry you off, and maybe have a human SWAT instead of we having a fly SWAT, and so Mark and I have been able to share some laughs just via text or via email. And I think that's important in this process. And I think that's why it's important for people like Mark to get on this podcast, for people to understand it's a lonely spot sometimes, especially lonely on your campus, because nobody understands what you're doing. But for us to have this platform to be able to share ideas with people and to share guests with people. And I know Mark well enough to know that if you want to reach out to Mark, Mark's receptive to that, and he'll learn with you, he'll teach you, he'll mentor you, he'll embrace you, but he'll also be real, just like the conversation that we had with his parent, or we heard with his parent today. So, Mark, I appreciate you. Nobody wants to follow the legend, and nobody wants to follow the original one, obviously, with Becky Moran and
Three Socks Moran.
But you did a phenomenal job, and I appreciate you taking the chance on it.
Oh, no, I appreciate you guys having me on. I do, I kind of want to double down on what you just said, Dustin, because I think, for newer ADs and ADs that are new to the profession, I think it becomes easy, especially at national conferences where you see people who are involved in committees, whether, Dustin, it's you and I teaching the class or presenting, or I see this on the publications committee. Becky, who's going to be our new president. It's so easy to see those people and to just view them from afar. And I think what you said should resonate with all new ADs. Like, we're all approachable. We all started somewhere. Becky and I served on, I forget which one it was, the third strategic plan or fourth strategic plan about 8 years ago. I mean, Becky and I were on that together. That was when I met her. And at that time, both of us had been forwarded to that strategic planning committee from our state associations because we were nobodies who wanted to put some time in, wanted to put some time into the profession. And we connected with some of the people who are the big names right in the association. And you learn, how down to earth they are and how willing everybody is to help. And so I would just tell that to everybody. Whenever you see, whether it's Dr. Smith is doing his presenting or me or Becky or Darren, you mentioned Daryl earlier. It doesn't matter. We'll all help you out. It's the profession that we're in. We need to have colleagues from Arkansas and from Florida who help us out because there isn't anybody else in Grand Forks doing this with me. So it's always a quick phone call, email to get help from any one of us.
Well, and it's great to just, yes. And it's great to just know, like, it doesn't make a difference, speaking to ADs from all different states all over the country. It's great to know, like, the same things are happening, and it's not you, it's not your school, it's not your parents or your coaches. It's everywhere. It's the same, type of things that we're going to, and there's no reason like that to go through it alone. You just because you're the only one on campus who does what you do doesn't mean you're the only one that has to kind of power through it and figure it out on your own, because people have been there before. So yeah, I think it's great that you guys are, you're sharing your stories, and I hope people get a laugh out of it, but also, get some ideas and outside the box thinking going on to try to improve their everyday situations as ADs.
Absolutely. I think what you guys are doing are great. It's great. I think this is the part that's has been relatively untouched, right? ADs love talking and we love telling stories, and we've all got something we can share that was a misstep or a mistake or something that was funny along the way. And again, I think setting the bar with Three Socks Moran is going to make it difficult for the rest of us. But hopefully some guests along the way will get you something.
Yeah, well, awesome. Again,
Yeah, Mark, I was just going to say thank you again, and thank you to Ticket Spigot, obviously, for sponsoring this deal. And we look forward to just introducing people to other ADs and introducing people to the stories that we're all dealing with. Mark did a great job of just kind of being real with us, and that's the goal of this whole podcast, is that we're real. We tell the real stories of what really happened, and I appreciate your honesty, Mark. I appreciate your willingness to jump on and take a chance on two people that are new in this pod world. And as the old grizzly veteran, you can look back and say, hey, we can mentor you through this process as well. But we appreciate you joining us on this episode, and we look forward to having more episodes coming at you pretty soon.
All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks.